Hey, Strong Girls. I'm Molly Herford, sports journalist, ultra runner, cyclist, and author, and founder of Strong Girl Publishing.
And I'm Dr. Sasha Golish, Executive Director of Yellow Running Shoes, a researcher, engineer, elite runner, and your BFF who's breaking down the science of smashing barriers in women's sports.
Think of us as the intersection of science and culture for women and girls in sport. Each week, we'll dissect the latest headlines and cutting-edge research on female athletes.
Debunk myths about girls in sport. Talk about how hormones affect performance at every age, to the latest research in sports science around mental performance, nutrition, equipment, and so much more.
And we'll spotlight badass girls and women who are rewriting the rules of the game, sometimes literally.
Expect it to be nerdy.
And occasionally TMI.
But it will always be honest.
Whether you're a strong girl yourself or you're raising one, this show is for you. Welcome to Strong Girl Talk,
where sports science meets sisterhood.
Let's go. I love our little dance it out before we start every episode, and I really wish people that were listening could see us do it because it is not impressive dancing, but dancing nonetheless. Welcome back to Strong Girl Talk. I'm Molly Herford, joined by the amazing Dr. Sasha Golish from very, very sunny, very, very hot Spain. Before we get into why you're in Spain, shout out to a couple of Canadian mountain bikers for some amazing performances at Val di Sole this weekend. Nicole Bradbury won the U23 short track race, which is just like phenomenal seeing this like cohort of athletes that, you know, are kind of like right around. She's the same age as Bella and Ava Holmgren, who are obviously crushing it. They're over on Lidl Trek now, you know, winning every race, really. And to see, you know, the other young women who came up with them also just absolutely smashing it is so exciting. Jen Jackson also had a great weekend. Seeing her, you know, perform really consistently this season. Like, I think she's in the top five. She might actually be top 5 right now in the rankings, which, I mean, we've had a lot of Canadian women who've made it into the top 5, top 10 in the rankings, which is pretty sweet, but like not in recent years. So like it's really rad to see Canada making this epic comeback in women's mountain biking, I'm going to say, after just, you know, a few years of kind of like a dip, which I think is normal and natural and expected, but to see, okay, we're not just like going away for all time, we're back, is very, very exciting. So that's my highlight of the week as far as like sports go. And I feel like your brain has just been all ultimate frisbee all the time for the last several days in Spain. So talk to us about what the heck you're doing there.
For sure. I mean, also the faith keeping on, which we'll get to. Like, my brain is like in two different directions. And actually, following this, I really have a meeting with the sport minister back in Canada. So my brain's in like three directions. But I am in Logroño, and I don't actually how you say an N with the squiggle over top in Spain, but north of Madrid in this mountain town at the the WIFDF, World Flying Disc Federation, under 24 Ultimate Frisbee Championships. And there's a couple things that have been like super cool. So Ultimate has always been one of the most inclusive games. And so there's 3 categories that athletes can participate in. Open, which typically you see as men, right? But it is inclusive of all genders. So no matter how you show up, you are welcome to play on that team. There's mixed gender, and it's a team of 7 on the field at a time, where, as it sounds, mixed gender, and then they have women's. And so I've always loved Ultimate. It was actually like totally the way that I got fit. We talked about that on a past podcast episode, but I just love the inclusivity of it. We are sort of deep into the tournament. Team Canada, when this is released tomorrow, will be going into the semifinal. Actually, maybe time change finish the semifinal. Okay, let's pretend time change doesn't happen. Going into the semifinal. It's a long tournament, and there's like a couple reflections. We talked about this before we got started today. I witnessed like an interaction where my coaching heart just kind of like shattered a little bit on the way to the bathroom. And so I witnessed a coach come up to an athlete, not from Team Canada, from another country, and berate the athlete for not being involved in team events. Like, hey, you're not warming up with the team. You haven't been to team meetings. We noticed that you left right away, and kind of yelled at the athlete instead of, when that happens, that pattern behavior happens, there's something going on. You as a coach are frustrated. I get it. And you absolutely should hold the athlete accountable. But the first question is like, hey, I just wanted to check in on you. I've noticed that you haven't been at these events. Do you want to talk about what's going on? Which is actually like a little bit loaded in terms of asking it, but it is an invitation for a conversation. Anyways, post bathroom break, I did check in with the athlete, and the athlete was okay. But it's just such a reminder of like, it is high stakes at these events and these tournaments. And I understand the frustration as a coach, but you also have to have the maturity. And honestly, if you are really there to win, you want to check in on that person so that they show up and integrate with the team, because that actually is how you're going to win the tournament.
I was gonna say,
As a
side note, like this just doesn't feel like the time to even be having
right,
that conversation. Like at most, I think there should just be like at that point an invitation in, like, hey, why don't you come over and like warm up with the team, or like,
yeah,
you know, bring them into what you want them to do. But like this does not feel like it's the correct time, place, et cetera, even from a performance standpoint, to call
no.
out an athlete for something.
And I think we forget that in coaching, Molly, right? Like we talk about it. And, if you want to talk about what girls drop out of sport, like in past rally reports, like 2020, 2022, we know that language changes things. From our episode with Hannah Silva Breen, right? That one comment, right? And it could be about like you showing up for the team. It doesn't have to be a body image. It's that one comment that sticks with an athlete and why they might drop out. And we know that when girls in particular receive comments like that, they are far more likely to drop out of sport than boys. And so it was it was a woman that was being spoken to. It was also a male coach. I might as well just like point out what happened factually. We can do better. And I think for me, like interacting with that coach, like, hey, I noticed this. Like, how are you doing? Like, I just want to check in with you, right? Like, if I was going to have that conversation.
Hmm.
Um, because it's not right calling in versus calling out, right? Like, call the person in, right? Everybody learns shared understanding, and it comes from a place of empathy and compassion as opposed to a place of attack.
Yeah, and as we say every episode, the clear but kind side of things too. Like, does the athlete understand like that this is the team expectation? Has this actually been laid out where she like appreciates that, the rule is we warm up together. Like the expectation is we do X, Y, Z. Because I think a lot of the time coaches get really annoyed with athletes, but the fact is the athletes don't actually have that context. Like the athlete is
Yeah.
operating on a totally different set of rules.
Well, U24 brain, like also not a fully formed, mature brain, like maybe can't see that context, and even fully formed adult brain, can they? Like everybody comes with a different perception. And so we have to invite those perceptions in.
100%, yeah. And okay, yes, by the time this episode comes out, moving on, we will be done with the breaking four attempt here. I'm like almost tempted to be like, we should record two versions. One where we're like, we knew
I
she'd
know.
get it. We totally knew she'd get it. And the other, we're like, well, I mean, she came really close. It was a great attempt. Just
Right.
pretending we know the two outcomes or two potential outcomes. But obviously, we are both going to be, watching this and shrieking at our TVs here this afternoon, I think. Yeah, super exciting. And I think like, beyond like it's hard because I was about to be like beyond her, it's just like such an amazing moment for women's sports that, we're at this point where we're doing this big thing and it seems like a lot of people care right now. That's
Yeah.
super exciting. But I also like then I'm like, wait a second, do I care about it because it's women's sports or do I care because she is a human doing this cool thing? So also like not using faith just as a symbol for like women might be able to break four. No, this woman might be able to
Yeah.
break four. So I think, yeah, Faith Kipaghan is going to be a name that hopefully we are talking about for decades to come here.
I think regardless of the outcome, we're going to be talking about her for decades to come. She's a three-time Olympic champion in the 1500. Um, she's just such a good role model in sport, right? Not just because she's a mother, but just how she's really trying to elevate positive sport in Kenya, right? Like not going to pretend there are some doping challenges in Kenya right now, and there's also some gender-based violence challenges in Kenya. Sorry, probably Canada too. Let's just be realistic. But Faith really is an advocate not just for her sport but for all women. And so who are you? I'm cheering for it all. I'm cheering for her. I'm cheering for women. I'm cheering for Nike and everything they put behind this and how accessible they have made this for everybody to watch. I'm pretty sure like if you're in Paris you can go to the stadium for free. You can watch online for free. They pretty much tried to not geo block it and making it available on social media. I guess YouTube counts as social media too. Prime Video. So just like I think this is like a turning point in sport, regardless of what the outcome is, right? Like,
Hmm.
how do we do things better and how do we do things differently and invite the whole world in, not just like the true track and field fans. I think you've got a whole bunch of people now in the world who are tuning into track because all of a sudden they're like, oh, I can get behind this kind of fandom. This is fun. like
Hmm.
it is about making it fun. Also, ultimate. We're gonna go back to ultimate frisbee. Cheering for that sport is so fun. On my story today is Raw drumming. They bought a drum. That's right. They bought a drum. They bought a megaphone. They bought a drum. We are cheering mania. So I hope there's a drum in the stadium cheering for Faith tonight as she goes around. If
Oh
not,
my
I should
God.
just like send Raw up.
Hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. Were you tempted to fly from Spain to Paris for it
Oh
later?
my god, yeah.
You're like Googling
Yes.
flights. Yeah.
No, I did all of that, but again, I can't go because I'm in this meeting with the sport minister to talk about safe sport in Canada, which on the next episode we'll also digest.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
and actually, one of the topics and what we want to talk about next is pregnancy and postpartum. So massive applause to the Australian Sport Institute for the recommendation for mum athletes, which I can just picture in the Australian mum for the mums.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You can
but
actually
all
only say it in an Australian accent.
yeah, mum, it's the mum. But forever, right? Like it's been this expectation that female-bodied athletes follow this male-bodied athlete, expectation, and then like this pressure to not have children to stay in sport, and like eventually it was going to have to change. I mean, it took long enough. I am celebrating Dr. Margie Davenport, Canadian researcher who is part of these recommendations in Australia. Canada's got some as well. But Australia like really got ahead of it. And I love it's like preconception to parenthood. And so I haven't got like this is like fresh off the press and I haven't gone through all of it. But I think if they're talking about parenthood, then I suspect that in the parenthood piece, that there are recommendations for male athletes as well. Because we've talked about this. Otherwise, the expectation for a male athlete is that, oh, their partner just takes care of the child, right? Like either generally a woman, but we don't talk about it the same way. And so like if we're talking about parenthood, there actually should be support for all of the genders who are parents.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I keep thinking that makes me think of like Wout Van Aert, who like had a kid during the tour.
Yeah,
And I'm now actually forgetting if he left or not,
he
because it was like
did.
in the final stages. Yeah. And it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and people were like a little pearl clutchy about the fact that he would
Yes,
leave because his kid was being
his
born.
first child, right? Like, listen, from people like friends of mine who have like four or five, they're like, you get to the fifth, you're like, whatever. Like, even as the mom, like my neighbor was like, wow, the fifth one, I was like, great, okay, next, like, okay, moving on. But your first child, like, I loved that. I loved celebrating that about Wout. And I was at this gaming event last weekend, and I think one of the things that really has to change is the conversation around that. And it's not just women speaking up to say, hey, it's really cool that Wout Van Aert went to see the birth of his child. It's all, and other riders did. I think, Pogacar was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Wout just had a child. I'm so glad he's there. And I think those are the conversations that are happening. And that's the stuff that's moving the needle.
Hmm. Which is, sad that it takes,
I know.
men having kids to suddenly have people be like, having kids,
Oh,
parenthood important. But here we are. Here we are.
says the two women who are like, your children are great, but we're just not going to have any. But to that point, it is really important that like, we lift all of the things up because when we lift everything up, everything gets better. And I will say, like celebrating the WTA announcement that came just before the Australian Sport Institute announcement, right? You now, if you're going through fertility treatment, you have your number protected, like your position protected in the World Tennis Association, which is
Hmm.
awesome because those hormone changes can, not always, but most of the time, make training and competition really challenging. So it's recognizing that like this is equity, right? What different people need to be the best version of themselves.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Talk to me about the Canada Bill S212, which sounds very intimidating.
So Bill S-212 is currently in the Senate. It went through its second reading this week, and I think they're trying to get it pushed through before summer break, summer camp. All the senators go to summer camp. But
I would love to see that.
right? Hey,
I
are
mean,
you going water skiing today? Are you swimming? Are you playing dodgeball?
are we gonna get over the wall? Are we gonna do like the team building? You know
Yeah.
what? Honestly, maybe that's what politics needs. More team building
Oh my God.
exercises.
I mean, wholeheartedly agree. But and actually speaking to it, it's the National Strategy for Children and Youth Act. And so Marnie McBean spoke to it. I haven't read the whole thing. I am through a totally biased lens speaking to Marnie McBean's speech the other day, where she talked about just how important sport and physical activity is in child and youth well being. And she related it primarily to mental health as a strategy. I saw on LinkedIn that Norway actually officially made physical activity as a prescription for mental illness and mental health. Gesundheit. Yeah, nobody saw that, but I'm saying Gesundheit because
Thank
it's
you. Thank
polite.
you. Mhm.
You're welcome. Um, you can officially like say here's what we prescribe for physical activity for you to help you improve your mental health. I mean, like again, asterisks, we are not mental health coaches, we're not mental health practitioners, but we know from the research that there is a benefit of physical activity in sport and mental health. And, one of the things, for the last year we've been talking about in my lab, probably the last 18 months, is the loss of physical activity and sport in schools. And so if we think about this like mental health crisis in schools, like thank you, Marnie McBean, for all that work. And now it's my turn to like pick up the baton and start to put this in the research again to say, well, here's what we saw. Here are all these mental health strategies that have been, suggested for schools. None of them, and I pretty positive, not anecdotally, but from what I remember in the research, none of the policies across Canada use physical activity or sport as a way to combat mental health. And so I was so thankful to see that from Marnie McBean. And in her speech, she spoke specifically to the fact that, like, the diversity factors we talk about. Girls are less likely to participate in physical activity and sports. So we need to think differently. Same with newcomers, Indigenous people, racialized people, like really thinking about the discrimination and harassment piece so that we make it equitable for all of the students in schools.
Hmm. Love it. Love it. Also excited. So Malala, like yes, that Malala, just
Yeah,
just launched an initiative to support women in sport. It's called Recess, and it's all basically all about that, right? It's all about just promoting sport and physical activity on more of like an international global lens. And it's not to say like she's obviously not the first woman to be doing this kind of work, but what I love is, she's someone where you're talking about this much broader picture of like sustainable development goals and, women and children and, physical and psychological and mental and emotional well-being and safety. And she is bringing sport and play and physical activity to the forefront of that. And that is just so cool and so important because I think when a woman like that is talking about sport and physical activity, it actually, I hate to say it, but like I think it actually has more impact than when someone like you or I
totally.
is talking about it
Absolutely.
because she's not like I mean, she actually is very much into sport, but she is not someone you consider to be like an athlete, a sport person, a like someone who is promoting sport. So when she says it, you're like, oh, this is important from even a non-athlete lens. And like, my gosh, it is so important to have those voices in the mix championing like physical activity.
Well, and especially if you think about like, what she escaped and what she overcame, she's been very like if she didn't have education, in no world did she have sport as part of that. And so to your point, I think her speaking up is so powerful. I mean, she and her husband have invested heavily in the NSL, NSWL, and WSL, and the WNBA. I mean, that investment is paying dividends for them. So I'm celebrating that, like, way to go. But I just there's something I don't know, like if you went into the Instagram in depth and started looking at her Instagram, there's just something about her and when she speaks that you're just like, yeah, wholehearted yes, like yeah, like absolutely, I agree with everything you say. Like there's just this soft spoken beauty to the way that she brings things to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I just very excited for that.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
leaving this last one to you. I was like, exo gravel. I was like, okay, Ruby West, once upon a time, Morning Glory gave you a bursary to ride your bike. So, like, full circle, this is amazing.
Yeah, very exciting. So, my good friends over at Inspire Athlete Management, where Ruby West is now an athlete manager, Ruby West, Canadian cyclist, very decorated Canadian cyclist. She retired about a year ago, year and a half ago from cycling. Actually, back in 2024, I did an article with Canadian Cycling Magazine about the Olympic dream and sort of the costs of the Olympic dream,
Yeah.
kind of more on the like mental level. And Ruby was one of the most like open, vulnerable interviews in that entire feature. If you have access to a Canadian library card, you can actually go on the digital library on Libby and access that old issue from 2024 for free. So, highly recommend doing that if you want to check it out.
actually, it's if you have any library card globally, I think you get access to the because you get if you can get access to Libby or
Mm,
Overdrive. So actually, Molly, it's not just limited to Canada. I think we can get your article in the hands of the world.
possibly. I'm not so I'm actually very sneaky because I still have my mom's New Jersey library card, and that one doesn't have the same depth of magazines on Libby.
Oh, interesting. I was like
So,
The New York City library card that I often renew.
oh, nice.
Yeah, she gets you lots.
Nice, nice. Or
We're
on
such nerds.
we're such
Oh
nerds.
my
Also,
gosh.
Apple News. If you have an Apple News subscription, you can
Oh my
also get
gosh.
that 2024. Oh my God, yeah. Okay, anyway.
How
Uh
many library cards do you have?
hmm. I love that we're both doing that same hack though. That makes me so happy. Anyway,
Oh my gosh.
Exo Gravel. So yeah, Ruby is the Chief Gravel Officer is actually the title we've come up with. I'm helping them a little bit. I've worked with Inspire Athlete Management a bit on just kind of like phrasing and just some of the wordsmithing of some of their various initiatives. So I was just on a call with them yesterday. They're launching Exo Gravel today, Thursday, June 26th, and it's a supported women's team. Not just part of a men's team, but like its own women's gravel program. Super exciting, and they are currently looking for riders. So they have open applications. So anyone listening who is a gravel racer who's thinking they maybe want to take this a little more seriously, or someone who should have a contract or should have more support than they do, definitely check it out. It's exogravel.com, I believe. We will include a link in the show notes. And before we get into my key takeaways from the ESPNW conference, just a quick housekeeping note. We are going to go to, just for July, August, for summer break, we're going to go to an every other week podcasting schedule, just with our various summer schedules. I realize we are struggling here to make this happen every single week. So we're taking a little bit of a summer break for ourselves, but we are not going completely away. We are just going to every other week. So mark your calendars. Don't forget us. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss episodes. Okay. Most important thing this week, we're talking about the ESPNW summit that happened here in Toronto this past week, June 18th. ESPNW summit has also happened in New York City. I think there's even more. This one was, super cool. I would say a lot of Canadian flavor to it. A lot of the speakers were Canadian, a lot of Canadian stakeholders. Still, some international. There were some people from the UK. There were, plenty of Americans there speaking. Um, it was such an eye-opening event for me because I'm used to, Sasha, you're more in this like kind of broader sport space than I am. I am personally very used to endurance sport meetings, conventions, that kind of thing, where you walk into a bike event and you're like, hey, I'm looking for the guy that runs marketing for Giant. He's like average height, kind of skinny. He's got a couple tattoos. He's wearing like a black t-shirt. It has like a logo on it. Baseball cap, a little bit of scruff. And then you look
Everybody.
around and it's
Everybody in the
literally
cycling.
everyone.
Yeah.
So when I tell you, when I walked into this women's summit and was surrounded not just by all women, like there were a few guys, but like let's say like 98% women. It wasn't just that I was surrounded by women. I was surrounded by the most fashion forward, fashionable, just like dressed up women I have ever been around. I was absolutely in awe. And everyone had like, this is actually my point number one, is that like women's sport, the way it's viewed now is completely different than when I was younger and you thought about women's sport and it was like, oh, if you're sporty you can't be fashionable. Oh, if you're sporty, like you're not going to have your nails done or like be wearing like Alexander McQueen sneakers, which was a thing that I noticed and now covet. Like
Oh, really? Oh,
I've
tell me
never
more.
like
Oh,
I
tell us more.
never in my life have I like thought about Alexander McQueen sneakers, but I'm now obsessed. I don't know.
Okay.
But like,
Now I know what to get you for your birthday.
yeah, right.
Thanks.
I just have to wait another year now. Darn it.
I mean, I still owe you a gift, so
My
like hold
God.
up.
Oh my God. Absolutely not. Um, yeah, it was the coolest thing to see. And it wasn't like everyone was wearing like a certain uniform, right? Like I only spotted one pair of these sneakers. It was that everyone was just like dressed in a way that like clearly felt like the best versions of themselves. And I thought that was so freaking cool. Like it was all about personal style. I think it's just so important to kind of even just show, hey, you can be in sport and look however you want, and it is like you are welcome. The only downside was I really wish I'd like been able to notice that before because I was actually like really stressing over what to wear. I think I did fine, but I was like,
You did great. I saw your gram. You looked great.
I might have put on a little more makeup to be totally honest.
I still would not wear no makeup. Oh my God, zero, no makeup. Like I'm all about the face sunscreen. Okay, so one of the things, like I think one of the like my reflections from the female athlete conference and hearing you talk now is I think one of the gaps that we're missing is then how do we relate this back to men's sport, right?
mm,
And for me, right, I want to see in men's sport, like there's this like, and I remember in the NBA and Chris Bosh in particular, like didn't want to wear a suit to the game, but he felt forced. And I know other black male athletes have talked about this like this pressure to conform to this like white male sport. Okay, well, you've now seen what the women do. So let's learn from women's sport. And you want to make it equitable? Hey, NBA, NHL, all of that men's sport, let those men show up as they want. Because do you want them to play their best? Well, then let them show up like you just said it, right? Like people got to show up confident because they wore an outfit that made them feel confident.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, you see this with like now the WNBA, when you see them traveling, it's like they're showing like it's so many different vibes like walking through. It's fantastic. Like it's not
Yeah.
that they're all wearing the same thing. Yeah. No, like one of them is wearing like a suit, but it's like a, tailored, like awesome, rad suit.
Oh yeah.
And then,
With good shoes, probably Alexander McQueen shoes.
probably
Just let's
Alexander
be
McQueen. Yeah.
yeah.
It's just like it's the coolest thing, and I love that. It also when you said the suit thing, it just reminded me of season one of Ted Lasso. There's
Oh
the
yeah.
episode where they're going to like the banquet type thing, and
Yep.
Jamie Tart, the one soccer player, like takes off the shirt under the suit, so he's just wearing the suit jacket, and it's like suddenly fabulous, and it's like, oh, okay, there is
Yeah.
like you can make this your own, and like they applauded it there. So can we just do that in actual sport, not just in like a sitcom about
Yes.
sport? That would be great.
Yeah.
So the other takeaway I got is what I think is cool, but also like so hard about women's sport is that it is so inherently political in a way that I both applaud because I believe in the politics of it, but I also wish it didn't have to be, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Um,
Totally makes sense. You can hold two ideas at the same time, right?
yeah,
Like that's a definition of intelligence.
like
Absolutely.
because like on one hand, I'm like, oh my God, I love that Sarah Spain from ESPNW was there. She was the moderator, commentator. We desperately want to get her on this podcast. It's gonna happen, I swear. She's fabulous. I got to chat with her. She was so much fun. She is super political. Obviously being in the US, it's very hard to avoid political no matter what form of work you do. But she's very overtly political. So were, several of the people on the panels, and I think that's fantastic. But I also, wish that women's sport didn't have to be viewed through a lens of politics every time. Which, maybe in the future we'll get there.
When it's a burden, right? Like,
Yeah.
so related but not related, I was listening to the monk debates from last week, and there were three men on the monk debate and one woman. And she was the only one who spoke up about being a mother. And I think back to the IOC guidelines that were released around Paris last year. And it was like, we need, if you're talking about female athlete with children, then you need to do the same with male athletes and talk about their children, right? Like if you're talking about the way that they're dressed, right, you need to do that across both sexes, right? Like, and I just, why is it that women's sport has to bear the brunt of being political? Like, if it's going to be political, which it seems right now, and I actually think there's some good things about it being political, mostly because like sport can unite us, right? I'm at this tournament in
100%.
Spain, right? Like, sport is a way to unite us. So, if we're going to make it political, all of it needs to be political because
Hmm.
otherwise it's a very unfair burden. And it's actually not just to the athletes. Like, I think about their coaches, to the officials, right? Like, think about the officials in women's sport where officials have been like a place of politicization before, like and nobody talks about the officials. I see you officials, I care about you, right? To all of the administration, like it is this like um lioness's dust cloud like following women's sport, but we could
Exactly.
remove it as a dust cloud and it could just be part of all of sport and part of equity if we could talk about it in a different way as opposed to burdening women's sport.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do love that, this summit really spent all of the time talking about really more of these political and economic drivers. Like I love that the other week we had the female athlete conference. We had the takeaways that were, very much the science of women's sport and the science of being a female athlete. I think that's so important, and so important that we also have these conversations about the practical, like, okay, but here's where the money is coming from. Here's how the money is being
Yeah.
looked at. Because we don't get change with just the science. We get change with, unfortunately, like we live in a late stage capitalist society, for better or worse. So to have any change, like there has to be that economic side behind it. And I think the argument for that is actually getting much, much better. And actually, where I saw the research and this, like the research, and then kind of like, let's say, like the economics of this summit really come together is the number of people speaking that cited the rally report. And I
Yeah.
wanted to highlight that because it's not just that it's research, right? It is very intelligently and like marketed research. And this is not, I'm not saying marketed in a negative way. I'm saying it in the most positive way. The rally report from the Canadian Women in Sport did the best, like has the best PR that I've ever seen, right? Like
Yeah.
when they launched that report, which is based on, all of these surveys, all of this research, when they launched the report, they did a launch party. They sent it everywhere. That report got everywhere. The fact that they called it the rally report. So now it just kind of like is just this like quick vernacular. Like it's almost become kind of this like um not acronym, but like shorthand for like, yeah, research
Yeah.
about women in sport. That's like that we need to bring more girls and women into sport. Like,
Yeah.
and you know, I think what's great about this is like how it was done is fantastic. What scares me a little bit about it is how well that worked. Um,
Really? Okay,
okay,
tell me more.
okay, so in this case, it's fantastic. It was used for
Mhm.
good, right? This is great research that's been used in a good way, marketed in a good way. But it also to me shows like how much, like Sasha, how much research is there about the lack of, support and, help for girls and women in sport and how far we have to come. Because I think there's a pretty large body of research on this right now. There's a lot of researchers working on this right now. There are a lot of papers and articles and surveys done on this right now. The but the rally report has risen to the top as the like thing about it because it was really well marketed. It's accurate. Like, do not get me wrong. I am like 200% behind the rally report. What scares me is that I could see this being this
Yeah.
method of promoting research
Yeah.
being used for ill. For
Yeah.
example, in the politics of sport here, I'm like, you could see researchers having, less than great research using kind of cute infographics and a marketing campaign around their research to, the He-Man Women Haters Club puts out the He-Man,
I was
homophobia
gonna go with
report
fasting. I
2026.
was gonna.
Like,
It's funny. I was gonna go with fasting for women, but you went with He-Man. I was like, but you make a really good point. It's so easy now to make pretty graphics and market yourself, right? And say like, well, you should be doing this. And said, by the way, just for fasting, everybody fasts. I don't know about you, but I'm not eating while I'm sleeping. I used to sometimes keep chocolate covered almonds in my drawer when I was like in the middle of marathon training and like start like towards like the big volume weeks and starving. But otherwise, if you anyway, but your point, yeah, you can cycle dis and misinformation and probably like not only that, like it could be valid information, maybe biased, and tell a story that really harms women's sport. So
exactly. So I think it's
yeah,
just something that we all need to be aware of is,
yeah,
when you're seeing something like this, where it is like this collection of things, actually looking into some of the things, just making
wholeheartedly
sure.
agree.
But I also think like it is like, I applaud it so much. And I think it is like researchers should be looking at this. This is something that you and I are working on that's still kind of like a top secret project that we haven't announced yet. I just made Sasha spit out her water.
Almost, I got it down.
But I think this is a way we need to think now in 2025 about how we're presenting research. Like clearly the Rally Report
Yeah,
did a fabulous job of getting attention and eyeballs on it by the way it was presented and promoted. And I think
I'm
researchers
just
in women's
laughing.
sport need to do this.
I'm just laughing because like my lab is like quite literally like the rally report and like was talking with the woman who's really behind it. So like I can't wait to be like, oh my God, we fangirled you on the podcast today.
We did. We did.
We
Um,
really did.
I think
Yeah,
it, like,
we
I
really did.
literally think that the Raleigh report is changing how we are going to think about the presentation of research going forward. Like, even no matter what field you're in, I think it was just such a
Yeah.
good example of a very well-crafted campaign around research, which I love.
And sorry, just have to say, and practical. You didn't pick up this
Yes,
piece of research that was like, oh, this is the problem. Here are a bunch of ways that you can address it. Oh, this doesn't address it. Here's how you can contact us so that we can help you. Right? It was strength based, solution driven to invite people in so that to help them to be better.
absolutely.
Anyway,
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Okay. And then a couple other key takeaways. Women's sports are actually finally getting investment. But the funny thing is, it all seems like most of the funding, I would say, is coming from endemic and non-endemic sponsors, venture capitalists. Where it's not really coming from is still like, you know, NGOs. Like it's not coming from the government side of things. It's actually coming from outside investors that actually see the monetary reward of this. And I think
yeah.
that's actually how women's sport is going to grow. I think, sometimes like it should come from the NGOs. But I do think, we kind of need to lean into, okay, well, if it's coming from non-endemic sponsors, if it's coming from venture capitalists who are now actually seeing, the cool thing was they were talking about, they're actually seeing return on investment now, right? Like they're actually seeing that, oh,
Quickly,
yeah, this is
right? Like
earning us
that's
money.
and quickly, right? Like that in terms of investment cycles. Okay, Molly, you just spoke an acronym. And if I put my first year engineering design lecture hat on, and you said NGO. So for everybody who doesn't know what the acronym NGO is, could you please share with us what that is?
National Governing Organization. So this is
Thank you.
your USA Cycling. This is your Canadian Cycling. It's very funny because I didn't know all these acronyms before. You get so into it so quickly. Also, like the SDG community where it's Sustainable Development Goals just drops that one like it's nothing. And when I tell you I had to Google it, and also it's not like the first thing that comes up when you Google SDG
No,
either. Um,
no.
it's very annoying. Like this is actually probably why we have a barrier to getting into some of this stuff, to be totally honest.
But to your point about funding, right? Like, so one of the things that I think is super cool about the USOPC, so the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So one, it is one organization where most countries have it separated into two. That organization receives $0 in government funding. Zero. It is all private sponsored dollars. And when they spoke about it at the Female Athlete Conference, and I think kind of it's been reinforced, I think we use a word on our notes, it's been validated, right? That like investment in sport actually does pay dividends and there is a return. And so I'm biased. I think we need a system rethinking of the system of how I'm speaking from Canada's perspective of how we fund sport right now. I think it's starting to really trickle down and happen in women's sport, and I'd love to then sort of see this happen in like Olympic sport on the men's and women's side. Let me make that clear. But you're right. Like I think when we see VC investment, like that is a like we got a catalyst here, ladies and gentlemen. She's taking off.
Exactly, exactly. The other very cool panel was you would actually have loved it, Sasha. It was super nerdy. It was literally about like when I saw the speaker list, it was like a couple of like VC people and then like this person who was like lead architect at this company. And I thought it was like lead architect of like sports culture
Oh,
for women or something. No, she was literally an
an
architect.
architect.
And it
Yeah.
was like this whole conversation of, I'm not going to lie, the panel was poorly named for the fact that this was what it was about, because it did sound like it was all a metaphor. But the actual panel itself was literally about okay, the panel I think was called like building spaces for women. And I was like, ah, yes, like architect of spaces for women.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
naturally
But
this
like
means,
it was literal.
but it was
Hey,
literal.
listen, we engineers, we architects, like we are literal. Like we're physically building something. Here it is.
Yeah, so it's very cool hearing about that. They actually had a Paralympian on that panel as well, talking about, building spaces that,
Yeah.
are good for adaptive athletes as well. And I thought it was just like so cool to hear that a lot of these stadiums and gyms and stuff that are being built like from the ground up or being retrofitted are actually finally being done with women's sport in mind, with para sport in mind. And that is so important. That's how you grow these sports, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
just shoving women into like a gym that's been abandoned or a stadium that's been like abandoned by the men's team, and then expecting them to do well or to, make that turn into like a monetary thing. Like it's not gonna work. But if you actually like help them build a like shiny new thing that's actually designed for them, so rad. So rad. Uh,
Okay, putting my fan hat on for a second though. Also laughing at myself because I did this as an Instagram video. We're talking about bathroom math and design. One of the biggest challenges at sporting events is the lineup to the women's bathroom.
and that was one of the things I talked about. Yep.
Takes us longer to go to the bathroom. And like at the end of my video, right, I talk about like peeing and like taking your clothes off. Imagine wearing a onesie and how much more has to happen. And then I'm like, and Aunt Flo just came to town. So now I'm gonna take up even more time, right? And you don't have product, no tampon, no pad, no nothing. You're like, right, like it is equity and equality are very different. Right now, in all of our building design, we have equality. Where okay, we also have like a gender binary in bathrooms, which is also a problem. But let's just stick with the design manual, where there's supposed to be equality between like the men's and women's bathroom space wise. Doesn't work, and especially doesn't work for women's bathrooms with like not many women are comfortable yet peeing in a women's urinal, and they're still bigger than a men's urinal as it goes. But like we need to design things that invite women in and not just in the performance space, but in the fan space in particular. Because you are not going to go to a game if there are no bathrooms for you to use because the lineup is so long. I'd also say designing better snacks because like I'm tired of popcorn and hot dogs and so is my stomach, right? Like, so I'm really glad that they had a panel on building the future. And then I would just like put my climate change hat on for a second and say, as we think about doing this, one of the things to just think about is concrete is the largest producer of CO2 gas in the entire world, like by a large shot. In some statistic I saw somewhere, it is responsible for 56% of global emissions annually. So thinking about materials and what we do to lower our carbon footprint as well. All the hats. I'm
Absolutely.
just going to wear all the hats.
All the hats. And we are hoping to have an episode on that coming out very soon. So stay tuned. With that, we are going to wrap up there. So we will see you in 2 weeks for another episode. And if you haven't already, subscribe, rate, review, all the things, and enjoy the heat. Thanks so much for tuning into the Strong Girl Talk podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely head over to wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and of course, subscribe so you never miss another episode. And head over to stronggirlpublishing.com to check out all of the books by Strong Girl Publishing's authors, including Molly Herford, Misha Powell, and so many more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.